Welcome. I'm Doug from HD Ellsworth. The D in HD, if you don't get it, you're definitely not my wife, and this is Dying to Retire. Join me on a candid journey from my government job to the freedom of retirement. As one of the last of the baby boomers, I am hanging up my federal badge and diving into what comes next. I will talk about what led to my decision, on why it was time for me to retire, and what I did right, and what mistakes I have made. I am not an HR expert, nor am I a financial advisor, so I have made a few mistakes. When I can, I'll slice through the noise of today's headlines with a sharp, no holds barred commentary delivered with the kind of honesty only retirement can afford. This podcast is a safe space for non-woke people, and while I try to keep everything somewhat above board, and if it has to be said bluntly, it will be. Vegas rules apply here, so let's get started. When talking about retirement, there is a YouTuber I listen to who's also a financial advisor who likes to use the terms go years, slow go years, and no go years. And I actually like how they are defined. And although a lot has to do with how healthy a person is, the go years are just that. It's when the people just retire and they still can do things like travel, drive themselves around, work in the yard for men, still piss while standing up, and for the most part hit the target. I know our wives or the maids are happy about that. People in their go years don't need much help or any help at all. The way I see it, this is for the people who are around in their mid 50s to early 60s. The slow go years are those years in between. While you can still do most of the things that you want to do, uh, like you did in your go years, you can't do them all. And well, there's a lot of naps here and there, and likely a lot more medicine. Hey, thank God for meds. Think those who are early in their early 60s or early 70s. But again, a lot has to do with your health and genetics. And genetics will fuck you every time. You can be healthy only so often, but you're going to hit a certain age, it's going to start hitting. The no-go years are just that. You're not going anywhere without the aid of family or a bunch of expensive home health aides on rotation. And if you're lucky or your family is lucky, you can afford to live in an assisted living facility. You get fed 3 times a day, help with a shower, reminded daily of the names of the people in the photos, someone to wipe your ass, or to remind you to wipe your ass. While I didn't come upon the YouTuber until my parents passed away, he did help me come to terms with and accept the little voice in the back of my head that telling me that kept telling me it was time for a change, time to really think about retirement. And why was that voice telling me this? Well, let's go back a few years. My parents finalized their divorce around the time I graduated high school and joined the military. That's in the early 1980s. My mom, after the divorce, pretty much slid into her slow go years, but that was her personality and how she lived her life. She never traveled anywhere except when she traveled to go bury her sister, then later her mom. She had her garden, and that's what made her happy. My dad, on the other hand, did continue to run his business until he sold it to a family member. Yeah, and that bit him in the ass because they say don't do business with family. It bit him in the ass when he entered his slow go years. In my opinion, his being forced to take back his business, then sell it again, robbed him of his slow go years. And while it didn't out kill him, it took a bitch of a toll. I don't want my retirement years to be like that, especially not to spend them in what we would call the Socialist Republic of Montgomery County, Maryland. Now to today. Since I started working on the podcast, my wife and I have been dealing with a major change to our lives, to our so-called domestic tranquility. What happened? We now have our elderly parents living with us. Now, it is good because my wife works from home. It is bad because my wife works from home. She now has not one, but 2 full-time jobs, and she was never meant to be a home health aide. Though she tries and we try, it impacts our lives. In my optics, her parents, like many others, waited too long to pull the retirement trigger and unfortunately missed their go and slow go years. I know they, like many others, didn't do this on purpose. They were stuck on that just one more year merry-go-round that so many are. But the impact is still the same to them, as well as it affects us as my wife and I enter what is to be our go go years. So, in a sense, we, like many of y'all out there and facing similar challenges, are essentially dying to retire. Now, back to my journey into retirement. In early 2023, I began exploring my retirement options. Fortunately, I was able to sign up for a 2 day course tailored for those of us who plan to retire in the next 5 years. And to be perfectly honest and unfiltered, I really needed to get the hell out of the office. Remember that they're the asshole, you're the asshole stressors I spoke about before? I was there. Man, I was there. Ever have 29 hours of meetings in a 40-hour work week, and most of those meetings are effing useless? And you just talk about a meeting to get prepared for another meeting and to get yelled at? Why were you in so many meetings that you couldn't do your job by the person who scheduled most of the meetings? Understand I'm digressing, but I'll cover it a little bit more in the class because it shows up elsewhere. Now, the 2 day course discussed federal retirement benefits, Social Security benefits, and the often overlooked estate planning and TSP financial withdrawal planning. The course started going over with letting everybody understand what was their minimum retirement age and the service requirements needed to meet for the minimum retirement age. Most federal employees of today are under what is called the FERS program, Federal Employees Retirement System. For those under FERS, it's essential to identify what your MRA is. In my optics, identifying an MRA is complicated but not complicated. In my case, as a mid career hire, and I turned 60 this year, and I was fortunate to be in the military prior, I was able to buy back my military service. In doing so, that bumped up the time I was currently working in my federal job. Now, I recommend people do this very early in their career because it's cheaper to start doing it or having a little money coming out in the early part of their career vice doing it later in their career. Because when you get near retirement age, you can do it. I believe you can. You should talk to your HR components and ask them about it. However, it may be a big giant lump sum, which, hey, I don't think a lot of people have that additional money hanging around. But you may be different. Like I said, in my case, after 20 years of service, I'm eligible for retirement. That means I'm eligible for the Social Security supplement that I will take at age 62, and the supplement will stop when I turn 62 because that's when I would be first eligible for Social Security. Now, my financial advisor recommends I not take Social Security at 62. However, depending on the environment, what's going on in the world, what is going on with the US government, this may change and I may jump into the system at that time because I don't want to miss out anything. Now, many of my friends in the federal government have worked for over 30 years and are close to or ready to retire. However, since they're in their 40s or 50s, early 50s, their minimum retirement age is 57 for those with over 30 years. Now, they cannot retire yet, but for them, it's a gift on keep on giving because 30 years plus pension is a hell of a lot better than my 21 plus years. One other part I'd like to talk about in the pension thing, because I'm going to talk about it now. While I was in class, I saw a coworker I hadn't seen for a good 10 years. And he is about 40 something years old, early 40s. And he was in the class. And I'm like, why are you planning to retire in 5 years? You won't make that early retirement age 57 until later. I mean, we talked about it, but not exactly saying that thing. But we went over it, and he's like going through the same problems I have. And one of the things, let me digress a little about retiring and retiring at your full MRA. When you retire, that means you get to pull over your medical and your health insurance, your life insurance, though I think the life insurance is way too expensive and you can get it cheaper on the open market. And you should research that. But when you retire at your full minimum retirement age, or full retirement, in addition to you start collecting your pension right away, you transfer and you can stay on to the federal health system versus having to get COBRA or getting another job and getting something or going on your spouse's. This is also allows you to be able to say, hey, when I get my pension, I want my spouse to get a half or a quarter. And you may deem that's actually doesn't not as cost effective down the road. But that's one thing to look at. To me, it was kind of important because the individual I hadn't seen for a while, he was going through the same scenario I had at work. All the 10 stressors I talked about, he was hitting about it. He was just frustrated and tired, and he had talked to his wife, and they'd come to the conclusion it's time for him to get out. There was no promotion going for him. There's nothing to move up. He stopped being a manager because he got tired of they were doing more political shit than actually day-to-day work to get the job done to move that marker ahead. So he went back to just being a regular grunt worker on the line. That's how frustrated he was. This is a grown ass adult, tier one college, realizing, hey, it's time to get off this, what do you call this, hamster wheel that we're all going through. So I know I digressed a little bit, but this is what's going on. And this is what he was not the only one talking about this or like this when we were at this 2-day course. All right, moving on. Recently, I read an article from the online edition of UK Daily Mail. According to the mid November 2023 article, in 1991, the average retirement age in the United States was 57. Fast forward to 2022, and the average retirement age is now 61. The article also included how much savings the average worker, not household, average worker, needed to retire in each state, and the numbers were and are surprising. Now, the high was Hawaii, the low was Kansas. Now, for Hawaii, the average retirement age is 75. The average savings needed was just shy of $2.5 million. Kansas, on the low part of the spectrum, the average retirement age was 52, with the average savings needed of just a little bit over $808,000. It's a big difference there. Now, I live in the DC area, so for Maryland, the average retirement age is 59. The average savings needed is a little bit shy of $1.5 million. For Virginia, it's the average retirement age is 56, and you need a hair over $1 million. So to think about this and put it in perspective, so those of us living in Maryland, let's say it's a two-person household, needs upwards to $3 million. Now, if I haven't mentioned it before, this is why my wife and I have a Plan B escape, which is to eventually move and take over her familiar home in Central America. To show you what I mean by that, get the chance, you should go to the website livingcost.org and play around with it some. While I don't always trust its numbers because inflation is all over the freaking place these days, shit, a haircut the other day at the local barber cost me $22. 3 years and some change ago, it cost me $15. So my haircut went up $7. I digress. So go to the website, play around with it some, and you'll come to a page called the Salary Adjustment Calculator. Now, in the Salary Adjustment Calculator, it will show the estimated differences in money's purchasing power between two locations. Now, it will do domestic versus domestic, but also will do domestic versus OCONUS. Good way to do it. Now, for me, like I said, the dollar numbers probably need a little bit of adjustment to be up with the current inflation, that's a stupid word, inflation. But let's look at this. $1,000 in Guatemala has the same purchasing power in the Washington, D.C. area as $3,300. Therefore, if you think about it, a $1,500 Social Security check used in Guatemala buys you what $5,000 buys you in the DC area. That is a huge difference, real huge difference. Now, back to the news article. I have I have siblings in Vermont and a sibling in Oklahoma, and this is what it looks like for them. And remember, this was per person, not per household. So in the state of Vermont, that freezing cold state of Vermont, land of what do you call it? Mud season, snow season, that's all you really have. Land of the Subaru, land of women wearing Birkenstock and hairy legs in the winter. Yeah. So Vermont, the average retirement age is 62. The average savings needed in BFE Vermont is a little bit over $1.3 million. 1.3. He's almost like what it is here in Maryland. On the flip side, my sibling in Oklahoma, it's 56 years of age, and the average savings needed is a hair under $800,000, $778,000 and change. That is a huge difference. And I would say Oklahoma's probably a little bit better living in than Vermont. Now, it just hits me. The reason Vermont costs so freaking much over Florida or over anywhere else, over Oklahoma and anywhere else in there. Now, I'm going to cover a little bit more. Everyone's fleeing California to go to Texas. Everyone's fleeing out of New York to go to Florida. Texas, the average retirement age is 56. And you need a hair under $900,000 for retirement. Florida, it's 63. And the average savings needed is $1,074,000 and change. Not bad. Now, this just hits me. The reason Vermont needs so much more than Florida, so freeze my ass off, difference is all those damn flatlanders coming from New York, coming from Massachusetts, coming from Connecticut, coming from Rhode Island, taking their pensions that they get from local or state governments, they move to Vermont and they drive up the cost. You're trying to buy a house for $200,000, they'll spend $250,000. Oh, it's an old classic farmhouse built in the 1700s. Oh, I want $1 million for it. And the people have been living in it their whole life, never paid more than 80. It's insane, but we all see it. But they're also the same people saying, oh, we don't want any gas cars. Everything has to be electric. No, cell phone service sucks because we don't want any cell phone antenna or the antennas for cell phone services that go up because that will make the skyline look terrible. The old not in my backyard people. But I digress some. What was interesting when reading the article, and I always read the comments, this is where you see who actually read an article, and it separates them from the idiots who are just talking shit or from the bots that are controlled by who knows that just want to attack the article or attack the commentators. But the commentator wrote, and it got my attention, the USA is becoming retire at death country for far too many. And ain't that the truth? That's it for today. Curious, concerned, or just want to chat? I'm all ears. Reach out at dyingtoretirepodcast@gmail.com. And if you find yourself nodding along or you just enjoy the ride, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hasta luego.